I will tell you on behalf of myself and our whole law firm, we during the last downturn in 2008, we were really kind of, we've always been counselors, like lawyer counselors, and all of a sudden we started having clients come in so depressed, and we felt like psychologist counselors. And so we launched the Deal Maker, the Rose Law Group Reporter, just to give information to people, because frankly, the only thing that kind of cheered us up was reading stuff and trying to figure out, well, maybe we can apply that to our lives, and maybe we can find a way to find opportunity in these situations that are difficult. And that really helped us. And I think, that's been around now for 11 years. And so when we looked at this situation, we thought, we'll continue to provide that information daily and all that kind of stuff. But then it was really important that we had social interaction and that we could bring people together without continuing the social distancing that's necessary during this time. And so we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this weekly. We're going to bring you good information, and we're going to have a very interactive chat. So we're going to encourage people to chat through the chat feature that Nick just described. We're also going to take questions throughout this. I'll go to the audience, and Court Rich is here with me to help me ask questions if we get slow, if I get tripped up. And first of all, though, I have to ask, where are you guys? Dr. Lewis is on. He is a frontline emergency doctor. This is like, I think we would compare these guys right now to the firefighters in 9/11. And I think from everyone who's on the chat today, we want to say thank you, Dr. Lewis, and everyone who's on the front line in the healthcare industry. Thank you, sincerely, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just curious, where are you?
Where am I?
Where are you right now?
Yeah, I'm in Phoenix. Well, I'm in Scottsdale, but I practice in the Phoenix area.
Okay.
And so I practice all around town, mostly though at one particular facility.
Okay. And Elliott, where are you right now? You're in your home office there?
Yeah, I'm in my home office. Everybody from my business is working remotely.
Okay. And Tom Galvin, you're in our Rose Law Group office right now.
I am, but I'm wearing gloves.
Fantastic. Very good. And what are you doing? Are you hiking, or what's going on there?
I'm just in the backyard. I thought I'd, good vibe here.
Why not? Yeah. Okay. I got you. All right.
I'll admit that I was biking before this.
All right. Good. Okay. So now everybody that's in the audience, you guys just keep your screens on, keep your mute on, and we'll come to you guys in a bit. And if you want to, say something, you're going to raise your hand. Nick, how do you raise your hand? You see that? Okay. You can raise your hand on reaction.
If you're on a mobile device, at the bottom of the screen, you can click More or Participants. I see an option there to raise your hand, and Jordan will see that and can call on you. If you're on a desktop, it should be your options at the bottom of your screen that will be up and available if you just hold your mouth.
Okay. All right. So I want to go to Elliott first.
Yep.
Elliott, here's why.
Yes.
Okay. It was maybe 6 weeks ago that we were at a real estate conference with thousands of people, 1,000 people at least. And you were saying, this is the greatest market I've ever seen. And absent, and I remember these words, absent some unpredictable global something, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And so can we bring back those days? Can I come over and shake your hand or hug you? And can we just flash back to those days and stay there? Because this is
This is, I'll get Dr. Lewis's take, but this is, from an economist standpoint, this is actually far worse than it looks. In that the number of cases, I think, is far understated. So I'm looking at a screen now that says there's 269,911 cases. I think the number actually is a multiple of that, a large multiple of that. And people have to pay attention to this, because this thing spreads exponentially, which means it doesn't go 2 a day, 2 a day, 2 a day. This goes 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. And every 16 to 20 days, it's going up by a factor of 10. So this won't take long to spread to everybody that the virus touches. And so what are the economic impacts? Well, essentially, the economy is just it's crumbling. It'll come back when it's over, but it's not going to come back quickly. But right now, you have basically three groups of people: those that are in hospitality, leisure and hospitality, and those are in retail. And that's about that direct, indirect, and induced. That's about a third of the jobs, and they are either unemployed or panicked. Those are the only two ways to describe it. They're not going to be spending at all. You've got another large group that has sequestered themselves, and they're not. There's no retail. There's no restaurants. There's no bars. They're not going out. They're going to order stuff that gets delivered to their door, but nothing other than what it takes to survive. And so they're not going to be spending. And then you've got the groups that are naysayers saying, this young millennials saying this is nonsense. I'm not going to screw with this at all. But they got nowhere to spend money either. And all they're going to do is spread the disease and make things worse. So you're going to have to ignore the economic numbers until this is over, because they're going to be absolutely terrible. I would expect the unemployment rate to go from 3.5% to probably 8.5% in 1 month. I think there'll be layoffs that in well excess of a few million, and it really is an event that you simply couldn't expect, other than if you read some type of mystery novel. This is an event that could be a mess of biblical proportions, both health-wise and economically. The reality is that at some point there'll be a vaccination and we'll be past it, that it should mitigate a little during the summer, and that'll buy a few months. But until things get back to normal, people have to be certain that this is over, and then you're going to end up with two groups of people. You're going to end up with people who turn around and have this large pot of money because they didn't go out and spend in March, April, May, and into June, and those that essentially are trying to figure out how to survive because they were laid off, and even if they get their jobs back, as they ultimately will, they've got a lot of debt. So the economy is going to recover quickly, but not fully. It'll take a few years to recover fully. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's the way it looks, Jordan. This is unprecedented. There is no, you'd have to go back to the Spanish flu in 1918 to get any idea of what's going to happen here, and that was not pretty either. But it did recover.
How long is the recovery then?
Well, first of all, you're going to have to tell me when the vaccination is going to be effective, and if it's tomorrow, it'll be soon. If it's not till September, October, November, and hopefully it's by then, it's going to take a lot longer, because it depends how big a hole people dig for themselves, those people who have been laid off. It also depends on how many mom and pop businesses reopen. I got news for you. A lot of these restaurants and bars and retail stores will never reopen, because a loan won't cut it, because you still have to pay back the loan, and that they won't be able to afford to do. So you're not going to get a full recovery, because A, people are going to be nervous. B, there are going to be people who dug holes for themselves, or the hole was dug for them by being laid off. And 3, there's not going to be nearly as many bars and restaurants and retail stores initially as when before this happened. So essentially, it's going to be a big jump at first, but you don't get back to where we were for quite a while.
All right. Dr. Lewis, talk about, you're right there. You're on the front lines. You're in the emergency room every day. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing right now?
Well, I'll preface this. I'm an emergency physician. I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not an infectious disease doc, but I've been doing a lot of reading. I think I have a decent handle on at least the current knowledge of the topic of coronavirus. However, there's a lot we don't know. And so there's a couple of different perspectives here. One is on the front lines in the emergency department and in the hospital, there is a lot of organized chaos. I would say that this is unprecedented from a practice of medicine standpoint for all of the current day practitioners, nurses, techs, hospitals. And so this is new to us. This is something we've never seen before. We're preparing the best we can. However, we don't have the supplies we need, and not just immediately. We have them immediately, but probably for the long term. And so we're looking at, potentially having to ration care based on supplies. And so it's a difficult situation. We're doing the best we can. I think the hospitals are putting forth great effort. The physicians are getting as prepared as they can. But I think that we could probably look to Italy and to China to see how this is going to go for us in the next couple of weeks. And if those are valid predictors, it's going to be a lot of chaos, and there's probably going to be rationing of care at levels that people aren't ready to accept in this country. Because, I would say in general, we haven't had to ration care much on a day-to-day basis. And that is coming, and it's not looking good if you look at Italy and at China.
China and Italy handled it differently than the United States, or do you believe that we're as late as they were to the party?
Well, I would say that we have to caution what we see in China, because we don't know what is actually happening on the ground. We know what we're being told. I would say in Italy, we have a lot more firsthand knowledge because the physicians and people on the ground there are sharing their experiences, and it's helping us to get prepared. It is creating a dialogue that probably wouldn't be there if there wasn't social media or internet access. But they are having to ration resources in Italy, and they've had to make very tough decisions. And I think that's why their death toll is probably, I would say their death toll is going to be on a higher percentage than what we'll see here in the U.S. But a lot of it is because of rationing care. They have an elderly population. People often live closer. Families live closer to each other, so the spread is much easier relative to how we live here in the United States. And I think in the US, we've been given a little more time, so we have more time to prepare, and we can use the lessons from China and Italy to prepare for what's to come here in the next few weeks.
So Josh, hey, it's Court. I got a
Court.
question for you here. So
yeah.
One, I know you're sporting some fancy new mustache there right now. Can you explain?
Thank you.
Dr. Lewis usually has a different facial hair thing going on, but so that's actually related to this. Can you want to explain
It
that?
is. So I've probably had a full beard for the better part of 20 years. I shaved it one time about 20 years ago, and my wife about flipped out and made me grow my hair back immediately. And so unfortunately, with the use of N95 masks, you cannot have facial hair, or you cannot have a full beard. And I was given the decision of either wearing something called a papper, which is a full headgear with some device hooked up to it to prevent any air from coming into your face, or to wear this mask. The masks are far more readily available, and so the CDC actually published a graphic that demonstrates what type of facial hair you can have and still successfully don an N95 mask. So I had to do my mask fitting yesterday at the hospital, so I was forced to alter my facial hair, and this was an acceptable setup, so I went with it.
Looking good. Hey, so are you
like
seeing at the hospital already? Yeah, of course Adam Trank likes it. He's got the same thing going there. Are you seeing the cases yet at your hospital? Is there an overwhelming? What's it look like today there? Are you just getting ready for the inevitable?
Well, I have to be cautious on which information I divulge. I'm certainly not hiding anything from you, but there are known cases in Maricopa County. I think we have 35 of them that are known. That being said, it is very widespread. There are some estimates that about 1% of the population has it, whether they know it or not. And so, yes, we are seeing cases at the hospital. However, actually the volumes that we normally see are way down in the past few days. And if we look at Seattle, their experience there was that a few days before it hit there, their hospital volumes were way down. And then all of a sudden the tidal wave of cases started coming in. So I expect in the coming days to week that we will see a very solid increase in cases of actual positive COVID.
Doctor, let me ask you a question. If I'm at home and I'm going, I got a sore throat or my nose is running, what is it that would make me, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to come in and get a test? Or, and I'm not saying
No.
I have this, but I'm just curious, like,
Yeah.
tell us what you want us to do.
No. No, you know what? Most people who will get this will be fine. They get a cold or not much symptoms at all. Really, the cases that we're seeing that need hospital care are pretty obvious and pretty obvious to the layperson, where these patients are struggling breathing, they are coughing, they have fevers, their blood pressure's off, they look bad, and not just to me, but they look bad to anybody. And those are the patients who really need the hospital. And sometimes it is difficult to determine if you need to go to the hospital or not. But if you have a runny nose, a mild cough, a sore throat, and you just kind of feel achy, you don't need to come to the hospital. And matter of fact, it's better if you don't, for a couple of reasons. One, it's better for you, because if you don't actually have the disease, then you won't be exposed to it. And two, it's better for everybody else, because if you actually have the disease and you're exposing others to it unknowingly, then we're just going to have a worse problem.
A follow-up question to that is, you know, I think all of us, everybody on the call is kind of, should we go to meetings if we don't hug or touch or handshake or pass papers back and forth? Can I sit across from a client in a meeting and not worry that even if I am, you know, unknowingly carrying the virus, that I'll be putting him at risk?
I mean, there's always risk of transmission. So what you need to understand the most is, how is this thing transmitted? And I would say ultimately we don't have the complete answer to that. We know that there's two forms of transmission for sure. One is fomites, which means it's just on surfaces. So you touch your mouth, you touch a door handle, somebody walks behind you, touches that same door handle, and then touches their mouth. That is what's called fomite transmission. And that is definitely one way of transmitting it. So yes, if you're in close contact with anybody, it's almost impossible to not touch things. And so there is a possibility that you could transmit it that way. The other is droplet transmission, which means respiratory secretions. So coughing, sneezing, where you're obviously spreading respiratory droplets to the world. You know, you technically have to be about 6 up to guesstimate of 10 feet away from somebody to transmit it in that manner. And so I would imagine it's hard to have a meeting if you're 10 feet away from somebody. I guess it's possible, but it would be kind of funny to sit on two far ends of the table. So I would say if you could limit those contacts with people, it's probably better. But there's one unknown way of transmission that could put everybody at risk, no matter how close you are to them, if you're in the same room or same building, and that is airborne. And the New England Journal of Medicine published an article a few days ago, which I haven't read in entirety, but it basically said that these virus particles can stay in the air for up to 3 hours. And we don't know if that means that it can then transmit that virus to someone else, because there has to be a certain number of virus particles that are transmitted in order for you to get the disease. And so there's still this question of whether or not this coronavirus is actually airborne transmitted. And I don't think we're going to know the answer to that for quite some time. These are answers that usually take months to years to really come up with, to figure out how these things are transmitted. But I would say if you're going to be safe, if you don't want to put yourself at risk, or if you're at higher risk, meaning you're of older age or you have multiple medical problems, just don't put yourself at risk for that. Find some alternative way of meeting with people and doing business.
Okay, so Tom Galvin, office. Tom, you've been working with, thank you, doctor. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tom, you've been working with small businesses. There's some government programs that are being developed. Can you just tell us a little bit about those things, or what you're seeing in terms of help? I mean, we've talked a lot firm about the small businesses, and we can't just let businesses go to the wayside, but there's a public health emergency. So what's the government doing, or what have you seen?
Absolutely. Well, the federal government has been working on a variety of policy measures and legislative measures to address the economic impact. And one of the things that we've been dealing with, and what we're getting a lot of phone calls and email inquiries about, is what is called the disaster loans through the SBA. So the SBA is able to give loans to small businesses that qualify. The loans are able to be provided up to $2 million, and they're at pretty good interest rates. They're at 3.75% for-profit businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. So nonprofits are also eligible for these small business loans. You have to fill out an application online through the SBA website. You have to fill out a lot of forms. You have to talk about any affiliate businesses that you might have that might be connected. And you have to talk about the different ownership setups and organizations that you have. So anyone who has at least a 20% stake in the business will have to sign off on the loan. Obviously, a lot of restaurants and bars most visibly have been impacted by this, either due to what are called shelter-in-place requirements, or even the governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey's executive order yesterday shutting them down. These are obviously small businesses. A lot of them are mom and pop shops. They are being directly impacted because customers are not allowed to go there unless they can take food for takeout. So Jordan, one of the big things that we're looking at is these SBA small business loans.
Dr. Lewis, thank you, Tom. Dr. Lewis, talk to me about that. Are we at risk if we go? I can't cook, so I got to go get takeout. I got a problem. My whole family, we've got a major problem. Cereal for months is just not a recipe for growing children. But is that a problem? Takeout, bad idea, good idea, delivery?
I mean, your limit with any person during takeout is pretty nominal. Those people are handling your food. They're handling the containers that your food are in. So there is potentially transmission risk there. I mean, look, it's going to be hard to isolate yourself from the world 100%, right? You still need to go to the grocery store. I doubt any of us are, have our own cattle and farms that we're, feasting from. And so you're going to have to put yourself at risk. There are things you could do to mitigate. If you can access just like a plain face mask, that will limit at least your ability to spread things to other people. And it may somewhat limit the ability of someone to spread things to you. There's theories that even just wearing a mask prevents you from touching your face. And so that will kind of decrease some of the spread. If you use good hand hygiene, and if you can get your hand on some hand sanitizer, or if you could just wash your hands with soap and water and do that mindfully, you're going to reduce the risk of transmission. But it's impossible to get rid of all transmission. So I don't know. I mean, I personally have been getting takeout. I don't have fears of that. There's definitely going to be some spread of it that way, but I mean, it's going to be far less than sitting down in the restaurant and eating with 100 people around you.
So just anybody on the chat today who's paid Rose Law Group at all, we have face masks because I am a near germ. Before this whole thing went through. So we have face masks at our office that we'll give you. Court? You're like, whatever. Okay. Yeah, so we have some questions coming in, and I'll also go to the audience to take some questions. But one of the questions is, and this is actually a question, but it's something that happened to me. I feel like I had this in late January. I had coughing, I was all these kinds of things, and this is a question that just came in. Could I have had it in late January? Could I be over it? And thanks for the question.
Yes.
Dr. Lewis, yeah.
Yes, without a doubt. Right. I think that, the theories, and there are many theories out there, so I'm not speaking as an expert, but the theory is that this virus jumped from animals to humans sometime in November. And China did not announce this as a possibility until December 31st, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty fast. However, when you're in a city of 12 million people like Wuhan, and I believe the metropolitan area was quoted at 60 million people, there's going to be spread. And there will have been people who have left that region and come to other parts of the world and spread it unknowingly. And so that's why we think that the spread is far greater than what's being quoted. You know, if you look at the recent quotes, however many cases we have, there are far more cases than that are unrecognized. And I think clinically speaking, it's not such a big deal because most of us will recover from it, and just like the flu or any other virus. But yes, it's possible. January, it could have been December, January, February. If you were sick with a cold, it could have been this particular coronavirus.
So then are we immune? We're potentially immune to it?
We don't know. There have been some reports of people getting it twice, but those reports have come out of China, and we don't know what to believe or not believe. We hope that there is some added immunity after you get it the first time, but we don't know for sure. But if you look at, there's 4 variants of coronavirus that cause the common cold, and most of us have immunity against those. And so, yes, when you get one of those coronaviruses, you have some increased immunity, but we don't know about this one yet. It's far too early to tell.
Hey, Josh, I got a question for you. At the beginning, Elliott, the economist, played a little bit of doctor, so I want to ask you to play a little economist maybe here.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, we're all locked in our homes. We're shutting everything down. Is it necessary? Is it worth it? How do we balance that in your mind? Does the economic price, is it the right price to pay for making your job easier?
Well, if you look at some of the estimates of the death toll in the US, if we did nothing, the estimate of the death toll is somewhere around 2.2 million people. If we do what we're doing now, the estimate, we could drop that death toll by 50%. However, if we want to drop the death toll by this is all predicted death toll by more than that, then we are in this for the long haul. And that means no school, no work, no being outside. I was reading an article last night from Britain that predicts that this is going to be 18 months that we could be doing this. And if we're not on lockdown, either by choice or by government decree, then if we don't do that for at least 5 months, then this thing is going to spread like gangbusters. And so some of the theories say that we should do lockdown for a little while, let it ease up, see if the cases start ticking up again. If they do lockdown again, and just do that indefinitely. But economically, this is a disaster. I mean, look, if anybody thinks that at the end of 30 days that we're going to go back to a normal life, you're wrong. And nobody can predict the future, but this thing ain't going away in 30 days.
Elliott, what can we do in our various industries? There's a lot of real estate people on the phone, but I see there's also a lot of other industries. What we can do to make the hole less deep so the recovery is easier. And that's actually a question that if you get on the Zoom group chat, you can ask questions that way too. So that's a question from Michelle. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Again, for those people who whose income continues, you're going to be in good shape because you're actually going to be piling up money that you otherwise would have spent that you can't spend now because there's no place to spend it. For those people who are unemployed or having real tough time because they were in leisure and hospitality or retail, this is an election year, and I think that the government will keep on piling on benefits to those people to make sure that they can survive this situation. At the other end of this, I'm not sure what it looks like, other than I would expect that there's going to be a period where these people try to regain their situation. As far as housing is concerned, there's going to be, for apartments, you can count on some people stop paying rent, and that's going to affect your cash flow dramatically. And as far as new housing is concerned, I thought housing might be down 10 or 15% until it got to the point where essentially we were going to be sequestered. And it's going to be interesting to see whether people continue to go to model homes or to even buy existing homes. People I've spoken to say, yeah, we're going to continue. This is important to us. But as things get worse, more and more people are going to, I think, decide they don't want to go out and mix it up with other people for a while. So I'm afraid that this will affect even new housing more than I expected before it became obvious that we were going to have to be sequestered. So what can you do to mitigate it? Basically, make sure you have cash in the bank. At the other end of this, there are two types of effects. Temporary ones, like, you know, you're not going to restaurants, you're not going to bars, you're not going to theaters, you're not going to ball games. That money is, those events won't occur, okay? And so that won't be made up for. But if you're purchasing a house or a car or an appliance or even clothes, that's something that's just delayed. And that'll come back in spades at the other end of this. It'll be an incredibly strong market for those things at the other end. But some things, entertainment mainly, travel, once you're not going to take 2 vacations next year because you didn't take one this year.
Elliott, Steve Daniel on the line had a question. Are we simply delaying the inevitable shutdown every time the new virus seems very overreactionary?
Well, you know, there was an article that I read. I can't find it now, but basically it described the difference between mitigation and suppression.
No.
And it was essentially, I think it was the model used to determine what we're doing now. England appears to be trying to mitigate things, which means they're basically focusing on
My wife yelled at me.
but not stopping the epidemic. They're reducing the healthcare.
So hold on a second, Elliott. Just
No, I am.
we got somebody on
probably be.
their wife yelled at them and everybody can hear you.
Especially for that part.
So we're going to get one of our domestic relations attorneys to give you some advice.
Phone call coming up at 1 o'clock. So we may as well talk through.
Everyone, go ahead and mute your line if you're not Elliott or Dr. Lewis or Tom.
The queue for
We're hearing about your personal life.
Oh, the line. Yeah.
Justin the Freight needs to be
Nick, can you try to mute whoever's
Oh,
wife dispute their domestic?
okay.
All right.
It's a
Go ahead,
brand new
Elliott.
world, man.
All right,
New
well,
world, for sure.
again, there's a big difference between mitigating, which is essentially saying, hey, people are going to get this and we're going to do our best to protect the older, the at-risk population, and suppression, which is to try to slow the number of cases and maintain the situation almost indefinitely. You know, what we're doing is isolation and sequestering of those, living with the people who have it, and social distancing, and basically shutting down schools. And that's great, except you're right. There's no end in sight until you get a vaccine. This is all stalling until you get a vaccine. Whereas mitigation, which is what England appears to be doing, is essentially not closing the schools, or if they did it recently, and let the epidemic spread, but try to protect the population that's at risk by social distancing and having them essentially quarantined isn't the word, but basically staying away from other people. The first one assumes that you're going to, the mitigation assumes that there's going to be antibodies in your body, you're going to be immune for a year or two. The suppression just says, well, we're going to basically try to keep you from getting the disease until there's a vaccine. And I don't know which one's best. It's a question of the economic damage versus the social damage. And I can't, you know, that's a question I can't answer.
All right, Elliott, I got one that you hopefully can. So Jim Mullen, who's an amazing real estate guy, has done some incredible deals, and thanks for all the good stuff that you've done, Jim. He says, I'm in escrow for a home for my parents next door, which is very kind. Would you close? Any way to know values 24 to 12 to 24 months from now? Oh, Elliott, see the future.
I can't tell you the values, what's going to happen to values during the period when we're still trying to suppress the virus. We're still practicing social distancing and isolation and school closures. I can't tell you what happens in the near term, whether people really get nervous. I can tell you that once it's over, the same supply-demand conditions exist, and it's going to be essentially a seller's market ad infinitum. So if you can get a discount because people are scared in the near term, that's great, and I'd probably take advantage of it. But once this is over, keep in mind, the basic economic conditions before we went into this were wonderful. This is not 2008. This is not something that the Fed is trying to stop inflation, that there's a real excess supply situation. This is something that occurred that stopped the economy dead in its tracks, but the economy was strong. Once this is over, I think the economy goes back to being very strong.
What do you see in the housing market, the segmentation, apartments rising, or the single? I mean, my thought was the single family rental communities that are, detached housing. Probably people want the pricing that was, multifamily like they give, but this detached single family housing rental community allows for people not to be living in the same ventilation system, in an elevator or what have you. What do you think about that, or have you thought about it?
Well, I think that the people who are most severely affected economically are people who are apartment dwellers. So I think apartments will take it on the chin more than single family housing and more the basically new rental communities. I also think the rental communities have an advantage because there is a little yard. You do feel like you're in your own home, and that's not going away. But I hadn't thought about the spread through ventilation systems. Since I live in a high-rise condo, it's going to be interesting. But the bottom line is that it's really the people who are going to have difficulty are people who own apartments, because I think their cash flows are going to be affected somewhat in the near term. And I don't know what you do. I don't know if you can, you morally or even legally going to be able to kick people out during this period.
Court,
let me take it for a minute. So Dr. Lewis, we've talked, our daughters actually happen to be best friends. So we've talked a lot about the kids situation and how to deal with kids in these circumstances. And I know one of the issues that I've talked not just to you, but to all of our friends, I know a lot of the folks on the call have children, is, what are you thinking and recommending for, our kids supposed to play with their friends during this time period? Should we just lock them all up? I mean, I know it's probably much of the same answer that we've heard, but I think uniquely, kind of what's your philosophy there, and what are you seeing other people doing?
Court, don't lock them up. Legal, sisterly advice. Don't lock the kids up.
Yeah.
This is a really tough question, and I think all of these topics are really difficult. And I don't envy the people at the government level who are having to make these really difficult decisions. But as far as the kids are concerned, the one good thing about this virus is that the kids are not becoming severely ill. And so there's been no reported deaths, as I know of, under the age of 9. And under the age of, I think, 16, there's been one death. And so in general, the children, even though they're obviously getting the virus, they are not succumbing to this virus. However, that begs the question, if they get the virus and they're carriers of the virus, can they spread this thing? And that is why the schools have shut down, is because we think that the children are carriers and that they can spread it. And so the danger of the kids is not to the kids themselves, but it's to their parents and their grandparents. And so, should the kids play? I think they're okay to be around each other in small groups. However, if one of them becomes symptomatic, I think that any of them who have been around that one child need to, be on self-isolation. And those families need to recognize that and make sure that they tell the other families what's going on. And, I would say that, yes, there have been a few children, there's been reports of a few children who have become quite ill, but they have all survived. And the great likelihood is that the vast majority of all children who get this virus will end up being fine. And at best they'll have, or at worst, they'll probably just have a cold.
Okay, so Elliott, you said, where would you put your money right now? Aside from, you said keep your money in the bank because you're not going to be able to spend it, so you're going to actually save a lot. That's a good thing. That's what we heard today, so that's good. But if you're an investor, if you want to create something, what are you thinking?
Well, one, at some point, the stock market is a great buy, but the stock market is discounting future events. So it's very difficult because there's such a broad range of possibilities as to what happens over the next several months. So you don't know where the bottom is, but someplace in here, this is a great buying opportunity for stocks. And I'd probably be inching in on any dip here. Two, to the extent you find somebody in the real estate market who is desperate to close, whatever, you know, he's going to get a haircut. That's the reality. Most people in the real estate market in this point are not desperate, and I think they're going to hang on, but it remains to be seen. And in the long run, demographically, single-family housing and apartments look great. It's just getting from here to there. But there is great opportunity born of this. That's kind of the reality of it. But when you're in the middle of it, it's tough to see. So I would take advantage of the stock market. I would take advantage of the differential between the regular bond market and the muni bond market, which is pretty high right now. And I'd certainly be taking advantage of any quick sale close that will save you some money in the real estate market.
Okay, thanks. So I wanna do the situation, but go around and anybody want to show us their bunker? Anybody on the call? Anyone want to show us what the funky pets? I don't know. Just trying to add some levity. We have social interaction. So Nick, maybe you can take control. We can scan the room. Can we do that?
Unfortunately, no. But what you can do is if you swipe right, you can kind of slip through. I see somebody's got a small dog there. That might be a Jack Russell that Jeff Brown's got. It looks like Michelle has a, what kind of dog is that, Michelle? You can unmute.
He's a Tibetan Terrier.
Oh wow, that's extreme.
He's the dog of the Dalai Lama. His name is Kipo. It means happy in Tibetan.
That's
great.
What we needed. We needed Kipo. Perfect.
Looks like
That's
there's
perfect.
a golden retriever and a bird, maybe, that somebody's got there.
We got a bird. All right. Well, all I got is a hamster. So Court, you got a turtle. Court.
The turtle and the dog are inside. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so how do we raise our hand if you've got a question? I know some people are chiming in on the chat, but if you want to raise your hand, we can have live questioning here. And if you have any good thoughts, any crazy thoughts, let's hear that too. Natalie Lewis from the city of Mesa, thanks for being on. I appreciate it. And she's talking about the apartment and motel and hotel owners. And is there anyone out there on the call or anything that would allow for the health department to utilize their location for the homeless population? So if you know anyone, or if you are someone that has a facility that might be available for rent by the government, I think Natalie in Mesa could hear from you. Good. And Elliott, talk to us about how business, in your opinion, how will business change? How will it still proliferate during this time? I know you've been thinking about this, and just give us a quick thought on that.
First thing is, now that everybody's had a taste of working from home, I think a lot of people are going to like it. So it might permanently change that movement more and make it more acceptable to work from home. As far as other businesses are concerned, basically it's if things slow down for you, it's time to do all those projects that you basically have been putting off for years, all the planning you wanted to do, and make yourself look better so that when this thing does turn around, you're in great shape.
Good. Tom, what are your thoughts on that?
I think just keep your eye out on what the federal government is going to be doing. The Senate just passed yesterday phase 2 of their 3-phase economic recovery plan. They're looking to do what are called direct checks. Some folks might be seeing $1,200 checks being deposited. And in addition to the SBA loans, they're looking at more and different ideas to jumpstart the economy and to give more help to businesses that are suffering. So keep an eye out on that, and we're tracking that, and we're going to be releasing that on the Rose Law Group Reporter as soon as the new federal legislation gets enacted.
So,
All right,
Dr. Lewis, let me ask you a question here. So, I read an article yesterday, or should I say, I just sort of read the headline that said that in California, they're expecting however many millions and millions of people, to half the population to get the disease, and however many to pass away as a result. But yet they are locking everybody down. Like, do you think, do we really expect that the outcome is going to be that grim, even with the kind of the dramatic steps that we're taking? Or do we think that, these steps are supposed to avoid that outcome?
I think ultimately we don't know the answer to that question. However, we
do
have some.
Painted Sky 86, please.
All right.
86.
Sorry.
All right, we're going to mute that.
Mute your phone if you're.
Blackstone Development.
All right.
I mean, I think if we do have some evidence that social distancing is working, if you look at influenza in the areas of like Italy and China, the cases of influenza have dropped dramatically in the amount of time that these social distancing steps have been, taken. And so we know that it decreases the transmission of diseases. Ultimately, over time, will it decrease the total number of people who succumb to this particular virus? I think it will. I think the projections are that it will significantly reduce it. And, the guys who are making these projections are using good data from previous diseases. And, I think, but only time will tell. But yes, it's working. It will work. And really, the whole point of this is that our healthcare system is running at max or near max capacity at all times. And if we add a significant illness on top of that, even if it's just a small percentage of the population that is going to require the usage of the healthcare system, our healthcare system cannot tolerate that. And, we will have unnecessary deaths from this particular disease if we don't enact these measures. The question is, how long can we enact these measures and expect life to go on? I don't know. I mean, nobody knows the answer to these questions. And that's why I say that these decisions are really difficult. The people who are making these decisions have to consider, the cost of death versus the cost of our economy. And none of us like going through all of this, but I think we all realize that each of us has to make some sacrifice in order to get the population through this. So, I think we have to do social distancing. To what degree does it go on for an extended period of time? I don't know. And I don't think even the federal government knows. And I think this is going to be a day-by-day thing. And that's why, I think this is going to go on for months. At what degree, I don't know.
Elliott, what's your reaction to that?
I agree. Yeah, if this thing doesn't end till there's a vaccine, it's going to last a while. You might get a little respite in the summer, but nobody's sure. And the longer it goes on, the more of a hole is dug for those people who are unemployed because of it. And there is again, a social cost versus an economic cost. And it's an election year. So I don't think it's going to be interesting in terms of the decisions made. So far, I think they've been rational. It remains to be seen. But again, as far as I'm concerned, giving somebody a loan is like throwing somebody a stone if he's drowning instead of a life preserver. Life preserver means that essentially the government is nationalizing that loss, and that's not what they're talking about. So
is there a situation where we're all going to get this in some form. Hopefully we'll all be the 90% or the 85% who get it in a very mild form, and then we go on. And how long does that take to run through the system? Do you guys have any comments on that?
Well, my personal prediction is that the vast majority of the population will come in contact with this virus. Whether or not you get the disease is unknown. And each of us, it's going to be different. And, you know, unfortunately, those who have more medical problems are at more risk of having bad disease. The younger you are, the healthier you are, the more likely you are to have either no illness or minimal illness. And I think we've seen that play out on television when we see all these athletes who are getting it now and they seem to be fine. And, you know, we've seen these reports of, you know, these elderly people who have multiple medical problems. For some reason, hypertension seems to be the one medical problem that is consistent amongst those who are dying from it. You know, I don't know, but, you know, can I address a couple of things that have been said?
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
You know, Elliott alluded to a vaccine, and I think this begs the question of how do we treat this, you know, or how do we prevent it? And, you know, the projections of the vaccine at best is a year. I think it's probably going to be closer to 2 years before we have a vaccine that's ready to go. And I think even that is being generous. You know, it's easy to say just make a vaccine and throw it out there, but these vaccines need to be tested. We need to know that the vaccine is actually preventing the disease or helping you fight the disease. And we need to make sure that that vaccine is not causing more problems. And if we all of a sudden just say, hey, somebody made a vaccine, let's put it out to the world, we may end up causing more problems than we are helping the issue. And so we have to be very cautious with how we, you know, approve these vaccines that are going through. And I think, you know, those at the high levels of the federal government understand this concept. You know, Fauci, who's the NIH guy who's been really, you know, in the president's ear this whole time, really understands these concepts, and he's been really good about it. But I think the other question is, how do we treat this disease? And there's been a lot of reports, you know, this report coming out of France where this guy treated 40 patients with these 2 drugs that are readily available and cheap. And these patients did quite well. But I think we have to be very cautious on how we move forward with this. This is, you know, not good data. All this says is that there's potentially medications out there that are already approved and in the market that we can use to treat this stuff. So please don't grasp on to these concepts and say that we can treat this thing and that we should be giving everybody these medications and that we should push this vaccine out right away, because we don't know. And we need more data, and we're working on more data. The system is working on getting this data, but we have to be very cautious moving forward.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, I'm going to do a lightning round because I promised everybody we would go at 1 o'clock. But before I do that, I would say like 175 people showed up to listen to this. So I think we appreciate that, and we appreciate you guys coming on and talking about these really relevant matters. We do this once a week, every Friday for lunch. We're going to have great speakers. I want you to send us a chat or send us a note. Tell us if you want more of this kind of thing, or what kinds of speakers would be good. If you're a speaker that might be good, great. Just send us those because we really want to provide a service and have some interesting discussions. I'm going to do a lightning to read some of the questions that have been coming in, and I just want you to answer as quickly as possible. So for the doctor, from Rita Thomas, who's a health advocate, a wonderful person, married to my personal mentor, Peter Thomas. So Rita's asking, is it safer to have a personal chef and prepare it at your home, or is it safer to take out your food? I need to know that because I don't cook. I know Rita does.
I mean, look, that personal chef is going to be exposed to the world too. So if you can lock that person in a closet and, you know, throw them in the kitchen, then yes. But, you know, I think if you take the measures of your own person to wash hands, to not touch your face as much as possible, to not be in other people's faces, that's as best as it gets. If you can afford a personal chef and have somebody come to your house and cook, and you can ensure that they're not exposed to other people, okay, but you know, the likelihood is that person's going to be as exposed as the rest of the population.
What about sushi? Can I eat sushi? Oh, please tell me I can eat sushi. If the guy's wearing gloves, come
Well, I
on,
think
man.
the particular food doesn't
Really
matter.
sweet.
However, we do know that coronavirus is heat sensitive. So things that are cooked are probably less likely to be carrying it. You know, we don't have the data on this particular virus, but previous coronaviruses are heat sensitive.
Ah, all right, well, what are we gonna do?
Does that mean it'll go away in the summer?
We don't know that for sure. The temperature that I've seen is like 15 minutes at 133 degrees. So, not
So
many
like
people live in 130
So it'll go away in
degrees.
July, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's gonna
exactly.
be
So,
the best place to
yeah.
be in the summer. Finally, finally, people are gonna reverse migrate. Elliott, let's see, are these checks from the government more emotional support versus any financial or economic support? It feels like a drop in the bucket, and that's from the well-regarded Jim Mullen.
Yeah, it is a drop in the bucket between that and unemployment benefits. It might get people through a month or two, but basically it doesn't address the longer term problem as to what do you do when you close down a big part of the economy. And so it remains to be seen. I don't think that this suppression concept will last for 2 years. People will simply say, hell with it, I can't do this.
Hey, from Bob Garland. Hey, thanks, Bob, for being out. This government bailout could be more than trillions of dollars. I suspect they'll print money, but what is recovery in the federal budget going to look like? Inevitable higher taxes? What do you think?
Oh, there's no question the taxes are going up. There's absolutely no question about that. And they're going to tax the people who are on this conference call because that's the nature of government. It's going to be high income people who are taxed. I don't know that will happen during this crisis, but it certainly will at the end of it. And in terms of if you're worrying about the national debt, yeah, it's a real problem at some point, but that point isn't in the near term. It's farther down the road. The best thing the government can do now is sell 50-year bonds at basically 175 basis points and just push the problem out a long time.
Okay, so from, let's see, the checks that they're sending, people are, from Rob Millar, thanks Rob, countless people are already having challenges making rent, mortgage payments, car payments, and we're only an inch into this. The checks certainly aren't the answer, but maybe a lifeline in the short term. What do you think about that? What do you think about the long term?
Well, again, these are short-term solutions, and the trouble with the long term is you don't know who's going to bear the cost. Is the individual going to bear the cost? Is the property owner going to bear the cost? Or is the government going to bear the cost? Is it going to be socialized? I don't know. It depends on who's elected in November. And basically, there are just too many unknowns to answer that question other than something is going to have to be done to keep these people afloat. It's going to take a while until they can find other jobs, and there probably are not going to be enough jobs in an Amazon warehouse to make up for all the bartenders that are out of work.
I heard a financial markets guy say, who's pretty smart, say that capitalism works in these situations for about 30 or 45 days or 60 days maybe, but after that, you need the government to step in. I know we're both, and most everybody on the phone is capitalist. What do you think about that?
Unfortunately, that's going to be the case because capitalism was not made for these types of cases where markets can't work because the government is mandating you're closing basically a third of the economy down between restaurants, bars, and retail. And so it's not real capitalism at this point.
All right. One last question for Dr. Lewis, and then what I want to say is I want everyone to please chime in on things you want to hear next time and how we can do this better. I want to improve this. We're gonna beat ourselves every time. We're gonna beat ourselves by bringing in more community, by being more focused on how we can deal with this and how we can prosper in these times and how we can find opportunity. Doctor, do you believe the numbers coming out of China that it is going down?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. I think that they're being very dishonest about it. I wouldn't believe it even for a second.
Okay. Councilman Benning from Queen Creek, thank you for being on. Thanks for your leadership. All the city officials that are on and the staffs, I see a lot of them names on our our participant list, thank you for what you're doing. I know it's a crazy time, and we appreciate the leadership that you're providing, because this is the time that we need it the most. Councilman says great discussion, and asked if we could be able, we could share this conversation. And yes, in fact, it will be on our Rose Law Group Reporter website, and we'll blast it out after this and on Monday in our Dealmaker publication. So we have saved this. Does any of the speakers want to say something to close?
Well, the
Elliott?
only thing I can say is hang in there, because you got no choice. So you can ruminate about it, but basically enjoy the time at home.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, there was one question about hospital beds earlier. And just in brief, Ducey, at least in the state of Arizona yesterday, enacted some emergency act where he decreed that no elective procedures can be done. And that's going to free up equipment. It's also going to free up beds within the hospital. And so, yes, we run at capacity. Our ICUs are at capacity. Our floors are often at capacity, but we have more capacity today than we did yesterday. So I think that is being addressed. Secondly, I think that we don't need to totally freak out about this particular illness. For the vast majority of us, even the vast majority of those who are older and have medical problems, you're gonna get a cold if you get this virus, and you're gonna do well. Some people will succumb to this. Some people will get very ill. Some people will require the hospital, and some people will require ICU care. And a small percentage of people will die from it. And it's always sad to know that, but this is not greatly different than the flu. However, this is new. We don't know how to deal with it yet. There's a lot of unanswered questions. We're dealing with it on a worldwide level. And so it's very unique. But I would say each of us individually has nominal risk, but be cautious, wash your hands, practice social distancing. And I think that we will get through this. It's just a matter of time.
Thank you, Doctor, for what you're doing. We really bless you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're right there. So thank you. Tom, what do you got? Tom Galvin, you got anything to close? All right. Okay, so what we learned. Well, here's the positives. Elliott says, look on the bright side. You're going to be saving money because there's nowhere to spend it. That's great, Elliott. Thanks for the optimism. We appreciate that. The doctor said, you're most likely going to be in the camp where you're not going to get greatly ill from this if you're healthy already. And you need to limit your exposure, as we all know, to other people. Okay, so what does that mean for us? For us in the real estate industry, for you in the real estate industry, it means, and for you in every industry, it means let's look at opportunity. Let's find opportunity. Let's talk about opportunity, okay? Let's do that. For me, it means can't go get my hair done, right? Not that I ever did that before. Court, what about you? Means no more Botox for a while? Well, that's not good.
Yeah, I'm big on that, yeah.
No more. Okay, so we're gonna do this again next Friday. We're gonna get a great panel. We're gonna converse, we're gonna lead. We're not gonna run away in fear here, guys. We're gonna look for opportunity. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks to our panelists, and God bless you. And thank you, Doctor, for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.